Hello, it is I, Dr. Brian Lorgon 111, and welcome to the second half of my interview with the Heroes Spirit developer. If you haven't listened to the first half, you probably want to listen to that first. But without further ado, let's just jump right into the second half of the interview. And yeah, kind of related to that, then, I guess the game released on Steam a little more than a year ago. And then, I don't know, like 6 or 7 months after that release, I guess you guys put out the Collector kind of update, which added the artifact shop and the P coins. And so I'm curious, since that's the version I played, I can kind of imagine what the game was like before then, but I am curious to know, how much, if any, of that had you imagined already at the time of the original release as like a thing that you could add in the future versus how much of it just evolved as people were playing the game. They were having trouble finding all these different things, and so you wanted to add some kind of, new power-ups that would help people do things. Like, yeah, how much of it was kind of before the fact versus after the fact?
Pretty much the entire collector's update was a direct response to feedback and reviews that came in right after launch. When the game launched, we were fortunate enough to work with a popular streamer that managed to get us a good little burst of activity right at day one,
Mm-hmm.
and that was great. And one thing we noticed is that there were a number of things that really weren't working for people about the game, which that's what you want. You want the bad feedback because pat on the back only does so much for you, but when someone says, "Hey, this could be better," that's very useful. So we got more of it than I expected, but that just means we had more work to do. So we got right on it. And then some of it was just fun that was based on the fun times had in the community, like the rabbit, for example. Prior to the collector's update, the rabbit was kind of the tutorial enemy. You see it, it's level one. It's the only level one enemy in the game. We did make it special in that it doesn't respawn,
Right.
but that was it. Um, and we had a little in our Discord server. We had a little guild hall, we called it, which is where we just throw out these random challenges and give people some imaginary points if they went and did the thing. And we'd try to come up with some creative stuff to do, like get the most enemies on a beach and stuff like that. And one of the little challenges we threw out was to kite that rabbit as far as you possibly can from the spawn point. And people had a lot of fun with that, so much so that they're like, that needs to be a thing. So, added the carrot, introduced the lore of it's the princess's rabbit, and yeah, that just kind of grew into its own thing.
I see.
Um,
That's cool, and it's cool that it just kind of like the community playing the game in kind of just a sandboxy way and finding other ways to have fun then helps kind of like evolve into actual new game features. That's kind of cool how that worked.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so then the other things, like it adds a upgrade that adds a whole bunch more save crystals, because one of the big pieces of feedback we got was people were struggling to get to a save crystal and they want to, and that's
Right.
now we so there is another design constraint in the form of this tool assist mode that the game has. Because of that, we can't really change anything that breaks that because we want to maintain backwards compatibility with that, which pretty much means no taking away walkable tiles in the game. Which meant that just adding save points regrettably would violate that. Um, but if there was an item that was placed in a way where it couldn't interfere with an old run that would add save
Ah.
points, then that could maintain that compatibility. So that's the route that we took. With in our next update, we're going to make some changes to that where I can actually make the save crystals a bit more accessible. But at the same time, we also made the compass point to your nearest save crystal. These are all things that were based on the review. Before the collector's update, we did a little visibility update, it was called, because some people just could not do the limited line of sight system, but we also couldn't just turn it off.
Right.
So we kind of added an option in settings that would make it act like you had the glasses, give you just a little bit better view, and then when you do get the glasses it just ups it further. But yeah, so we added an extended visibility mode that also makes the visibility directional, so if you're looking to the right you see better to the right than you do to the left. But we hope that that would help those players that were struggling with that particular issue.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much that's how the whole update worked. Every feature in it was based on something that either we watched a community member play with and we wanted to add more there for them to do, or it was directly responding to somebody called us out on something that could be better and we agreed. So we tried to make it better.
I see. Yeah, that's really cool in terms of the reactive feedback, and also a very clever solution to adding the more save crystals without changing any of the existing Taz speedrun kind of routes, by making it so the save crystals don't actually appear in the way unless you go into a place that you couldn't go in the old routes in order to actually purchase them or whatever. So that ended up being a clever solution to that particular constraint problem that you were sitting on.
Yeah,
Um,
it was the best I had come up with. Long term, I do think that we're going to have to let go of the tool assist mode. It's something that was dear to me personally. The community hasn't made as much use of it as I thought they would, and at this point, like this issue, it stops us from making changes to the game world. And we're at a point now, you know, several updates later, where there's a whole lot of stuff that could be a whole lot better without that constraint. So we're going to make the difficult decision to leave that behind going forward.
yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, like the difficult decision in terms of like yeah giving something up, but yeah, once again you were talking about kind of like constantly evolving or whatever, and um, yeah, responding
Yeah,
to feedback, and so yeah, that kind of
some,
just kind of makes sense. And yeah, I know that in my own early game I did, I think yeah, my first episode, like I never found the first save crystal or whatever, and so I ended up just kind of like starting over from the beginning in episode 2, and then found a save crystal and started making progress. And I've been watching someone else who also yeah was struggling to kind of find save crystals in the beginning, and so yeah, that seems like
there's certainly room for improvement. Absolutely.
and yeah, and so it's just cool to see that that's kind of continuing to evolve. Um, I'm probably going to, yeah, break up a little bit of before what we talked about, just for listeners who might be listening, just to hear kind of like about the game and the developers who don't want spoilers or whatever. And so I'll probably insert a spoiler alert before some of what we just talked about. But since we're getting into some of that, that makes me want to ask questions about a number of more specific things that are very spoilery in terms of the game. Um,
Yeah,
one that
let's do
I'm
it.
one that I'm really just dying to know is like how the idea for the QR code and the glitch zone inside the castle kind of came to be, because it's so out there and weird and inspired, and I just want to know like how you came up with that idea.
So that's pretty interesting one. I mentioned earlier on, but when I was talking about my background, that as a kid I would just sit there hour after hour entering Game Genie codes,
Right?
and yeah, some of those Game Genie codes didn't work out too well, and sometimes they just corrupt the game horribly. And I have seen with my own eyes so many what I'm going to call glitch worlds
Right?
that they just fascinated me. I think my favorites had to be Metroid from the Nintendo.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I remember.
when,
Okay, so I owned Metroid on the NES, and um, I think like just due to like bad connections in the cartridge or whatever, like sometimes things would get a little bit glitchy. But I remember playing that game on hardware and having like glitch stuff happen in the game that I didn't quite understand. Um,
yeah, absolutely. It did, and even without any glitches, there were a couple of ways to get into some alternate. There's a number of names for them, but like alternate little maps that weren't actually supposed to be accessible. And when you do, the graphics are corrupt and the sound is corrupt. And sometimes you can even get corrupted items that aren't even real items that you're supposed to get.
Neat.
Um, a lot of years later, when I was working on the N64 with Ocarina of Time, which is a Zelda game, I went through with a Game Shark every possible value for items that could be added to the inventory. And so many of them were not actual items that are in the game. And yet they still have text and descriptions. And sometimes it's just garbage, like the name of
Right.
a map or something.
Yeah, just like a memory dump from somewhere else or something.
And I loved it. It was always so fascinating to me. Sometimes you'd find stuff that was partially scrapped or cut content.
Right.
Um, Sometimes it would just be garbage. And so, having such a role in my own background is a little fascination. Naturally, we put this impossible maze in here. Like, nobody's ever going to get through this maze. It's impossible. And then, what do you do after that? Okay, well, now in this little safe that we built in the middle of, you got to remember the castle grounds was the only map in the beginning. So now we built this little secret area right in the heart of it. What do you put there? Well, let's play around with a glitch world, it'd be kind of fun. So we did. So we put in a little glitch world and then designed a way to make the tiles all glitchy and stuff. Even the properties on those tiles were totally different to any other part of the game. We had a lot of fun with it. And that's all it was about. It was about something fun, something that was kind of dear to me in a way, and something that there's a whole generation of players that just never saw that happen, So
Mm-hmm.
keeping it alive in a sense.
I see. Well, I appreciate that both due to, yeah, kind of like tickling some of that nostalgia in terms of people who've seen that kind of stuff before, as well as um, just such kind of like deep and unexpected puzzles out of a game that, especially at the very beginning, like seems so unassuming or whatever. Really
You know
kind of,
the unassuming part, that's pretty interesting because initially one of the big focuses for this game
uh
was
huh.
let's do something really simple, as simple as we can possibly do, and let's do it really freaking well.
I see.
So, what is the basis of just, the world's most generic, simple, distilled video game? It's an RPG. What do you do in an RPG? You save the world, you save the princess, depending on the game. We'll do both. That's fun. And then it boiled down the mechanics, boiled down just every facet of it. We kind of tried to deconstruct RPGs as a whole down to what really is it? What does it need and what is the fluff? And let's skip the fluff and let's give some people something they aren't expecting and haven't seen and try to do it really well. And I think it came out pretty interesting.
Another interesting bit that I wanted to ask about is the convergence of the original game and New Game Plus and New Game Plus Plus and the three different save files that combine to let you get to the kind of like the final end game or whatever. Like, I can definitely imagine that there's other games that do something like that, although I'm not familiar with any of them. Are you familiar with any games like that, or like where did that idea come from?
I have no idea. I couldn't tell you where it came from. I can tell you a couple interesting things about it. One is that didn't exist about a week before launch.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow.
And I was like, I've got this idea. I really want to do it. And I didn't even explain it to my business partner. I was just like, I'm gonna do it. So I just dive in here. You want to talk about like a hack fest? This was a hack fest. I'm like, this is just too cool to not do this thing. Um, yeah, so that was definitely a little rushed. So I
Neat.
apologize for the lack of quality control on that very last map. It's pretty flat, but I just no, I wanted to. there needed to be something. You go through all this work to play the game over and over and over, and it's like I'm not satisfied with what's at the bottom there. It's like I want a way to tally up your progress the whole way through and give you a big, here's how you did. Here's your total.
Neat.
And so working backwards from that point, if I'm going to tally up all the saves, well, at that point, I think you could see the logical step
Right.
towards what if,
All three of your
what
players were all of a sudden in the same game somehow.
right, if I'm gonna put them all on an end screen, let's bring them in here, and then, and it then it just worked backwards from there. What's a puzzle that we could do? And initially, it was gonna be did it in turns. This player comes up, hits their switches. This player comes up later, hits their switches. But I ran into the problem of how do you keep them in place? I can't save on the second switch and then let them walk away, and then so mechanically, I needed a way to know, let's make sure they're all here, all accounted for. At which point, this has to be played in a single session. There's no way to let them back out of this, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So then from there, it was, well, what happens if there's multiple player objects on a map? Oh, okay. It turns out you control them all. Well, I could work with that. And
Indeed.
yeah,
And yeah, it
and
made
it
its own
just
unique
kind of
puzzle that was fun
evolved
to
from
fun to
there.
solve, but yeah, kind of
And then at
straightforward to
the
discover once you got to the point of being able to discover it. Yeah.
And then at the end, with the end result, once you walk up with that second character and you see the first one still sitting there, at that point, everything kind of clicks into place, and you're like, "Oh boy!" And that's worth it. That's fun.
Yep. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with that, and it's also I really like the music at Convergence. That's I'll have to I have downloaded I purchased and downloaded the soundtrack for this game so I could just listen to some of the music, um, just kind of
It
again
it
on my own or whatever, and that's one of my favorites.
There is going to be another update to that soundtrack. It's actually missing three tracks that I think you've heard in the game by
I
now.
see. Okay, I will keep
But
my eye out
yeah,
for it.
the convergence up the convergence ending, the soundtrack is different because at that point it's like the whole mood is different. You're at a kind of a bittersweet point of the game,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to change up the vibe. I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what? The authenticity at this point, they're invested enough. That's less important. Let's give it a mood that is different. We have our action boss with the corruption castle. We've got our epic boss with the main thing is like this is more of just an achievement. So try to
Neat.
lean into that with the music a little bit.
Well, I think you succeeded, at least in my opinion, with that one. Um, that's really cool. The other kind of like spoilery kind of stuff that I'm curious to know about. There's lots. I think you've said like over 100 or whatever, like fake walls and mountains kind of throughout the game, and it actually changes over time. I guess when you get the compass. Um, how how did you kind of like how did that evolve? I guess.
Okay, so from that was actually one of those core mechanics. I mentioned that very early on we had like four or five little
Right.
ideas jotted down. That was on the list. I know one of the inspirations was Wolfenstein,
Okay.
which is totally a different game.
Right.
And here's the crazy part. I've never played the game. I watched a friend play it,
Right.
and they walked up to a wall and walked right through it. I'm like, what the heck is that? That's not how walls work. But I loved it. I was like, that's really neat, that you got to actually go look for this stuff. And so I was just like, what if we do that in 2D? There's no rules against it.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried it out, and with the line of sight system, it just worked so exceptionally well.
Mm-hmm. Because yeah, it
It,
can, and I guess imagine that pretty much it happens to everyone their first time, kind of mostly by accident as you're walking around,
we
and
made sure as there's enough of them, it's not just about quantity, it's about putting them in places where almost every single one could be bumped into by accident.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a whole lot of thought on their placement. The ones that are major shortcuts are put in unlikely places, but your minor shortcuts or just neat things are all put in places where you're gonna find it by accident sooner or later.
Right. And yeah, when you combine that with the line of sight mechanic, where all of a sudden, there'd been this wall and you can't see anything over to the left, and then all of a sudden you walk through a piece of this wall, and then this whole new section on the other side of the screen opens up that you can see something that's over there, or you can just immediately get there.
But
Um,
I can tell you this, I've watched so many people play this game now because I watch every single person I possibly can.
mhm.
Um, they almost always find one within the first hour of gameplay.
Yep.
And it's
And
always the same reaction of, wait, what?
like, wait, did I just go through that wall? And so the red swirlies, that's the other thing, because I guess I've come to understand they weren't always there. And so how did that evolve?
Those were added in the collector's update, and they were added to address one specific place. When you're going up towards the caves on the castle grounds, up to the little canyon area,
Yeah,
there's a passable tile, a mountain on the left-hand side, and you can go through there. You can get a sword. It kind of leads you into another area, and that area is normally closed off by boulders, so this is a shortcut.
right.
Unfortunately, without any indicator, I watched three different players get into this area and never find their way back out.
I see.
Because they're like, I'm locked in by boulders. How did I even get here? They don't even remember that they went through a passable tile. I was like, so it was, if I throw something that moves on there to catch the eye, then at least as they're looking for the way out, oh, hey, what's that? Oh, well, here's the way out. So it was put in because that is not a good gameplay experience at all to be actually trapped or to feel like it.
Right.
So I called it breadcrumbs, and it's about
Yeah.
finding your way back where you came from.
Yeah. I was going to call it breadcrumbs as well. And yeah, it ends up being a really useful mechanic in a number of other places. Like I know when I first got the lava charm, like I discovered a number of those walkable wall tiles, but it was a large map and I was utilizing a few of them, kind of going back and forth different places to pick up a shield. And so if they hadn't been left there on the screen, like I don't know whether I would have succeeded at that task. And then there's also the castle monolith maze, which you described originally as like, this impossible maze to get to the heart of the castle. And without the breadcrumbs, it would have been almost impossible because you couldn't necessarily see all of the hidden teleports that were happening.
You know,
Um,
to this day, I don't know how it happened, but one of our testers, you'll see him mentioned in the game in special thanks and in our Discord with a special role. Possum K is the screen name he goes by.
mhm.
Um, he was really into this game. He loved it, and that was amazing. He was a star among the beta players, and he solved that castle puzzle prior to the implementation of breadcrumbs,
Yeah, I see.
prior to the implementation of the rabbit,
Uh,
and I I really could not tell you how he did it. It stumps me to this day. I have no idea how he got through there because
yeah.
I couldn't do it, and I designed the darn thing.
There's a lot of games that either due to difficulty curves or weird puzzles or it's just a long game or all kinds of reasons, there's content in the game that many of the people who play the game will never experience. They may never even be aware of it. Um, and so, like, does that bother you at all as the game designer, like seeing different people experience and miss parts of the game that they might enjoy, or maybe just, maybe aren't interested in trying to find? Like, how do you feel about that, and how did you get kind of like motivated to put all this content in? Because there's so much content in this game, even though I can imagine, like, I haven't obviously seen all the beta testers that you have, but I can imagine a lot of people, put the game down before they found all the stuff at the end. And so, yeah, just what's your thoughts on, as a game designer, that experience?
Ooh, so that's a lot of question there. I'm gonna try to digest that a little bit here. So to start off, does it bother me that some people don't see everything? No, not at all. I understand that, there's there's different types of players and there's different amounts of investment that people are looking to
Right.
make in the game.
Right.
And that's fine. I am more concerned with rewarding the ones that want to be here. So I want there to be, I want somebody that is into this game, that they're playing it, they're enjoying it. I don't want it to disappoint them, and I don't want them to get to the end and be like, well, that's it, huh? Because I play games. I know what that's like. I remember playing more recently. I think it's called Reventure. Love the game. Fantastic little game. And I got to 100% and I was like, I'm really sad it's over, you know? So I want to make sure that at the least there's a long way to go. And even when you get there, I don't want them to be 100% sure that that was all of it
Right.
because
Right.
I like that, I like that unending feeling. But then you also mentioned, there's so many people that put down the game early and don't see most of that. There are two cases where it does bother me. Uh, one of the ones that's hard to watch is once in a while we'll get that player where it's just really not it's not for them.
Right. Yeah.
And they'll put it down in the first like 10 minutes. They'll run around, they'll die to a bat, they'll run the exact same route, die to the exact same bat, and they'll do it a third time, and they're like, yeah, I'm done here. And those kind of make me feel bad. I failed that player a little bit, but at the same time I'm limited in how much I can address that. But it does sting a little, and I'm like, oh, wish he could have just got 10 swords, because once you run around and take revenge on the bats,
Right.
that's when the game starts to open up.
Right. Yep. Okay.
So I feel bad for the players that don't make it that far. And so another aspect of this is that there's a whole facet of this game that is almost like an ARG of sorts. It's
Right. I was
made
going to
to
ask about that too. Okay. Go ahead.
be Yeah, it's made to be in a community experience. It's made to share. It's made to talk about. And I grew up before, barely before, but a little before the internet was a household thing. When I first started out on like the NES, we had to exchange rumors with friends or buy books, or there were cheat codes books or hint books that had, here's 10 tips for every game you own and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Um, there was a social aspect. Being the kid that knew where everything was in every game was kind of cool in a sense. And
Uh huh.
that's so gone and removed from today's world where the walkthrough gets published the day before the game comes out. And so I wanted to create something where no, people are going to have to talk about this a little bit. And I think we took an interesting approach to pull that off. You can't beat it by hiding information. That's impossible. You make something hidden and it'll get exposed, but you can have too much information for one person to possibly memorize. That's one possible approach. Another is to just have things that are so far out there. I remember, to give you an example, that's a good example, I think. Mew in Pokemon Red and Blue. I remember so many rumors of how to get this mythical 151st Pokemon. And I tried them all because I was that guy, I
Uh
got
huh.
hours I can kill here. I tried every little rumor, and yeah, none of the Mew ones really worked out for me. But I did get my hands on a missing number, or missing no, I
Right.
suppose. And the fact that that was real was really cool. So we wanted to recreate that, or at least I know I did. And yeah, so hiding some things in some very obscure places, such as certain QR codes somewhere in the game, um, it kind of the only way they're going to solve that is by talking about it.
Yeah. And I have seen a few games that have kind of gone that route, and so ARGs, I guess it is a, like augmented reality game or whatever. Like, I've
Right. I think the term comes from marketing, where certain big budget games try to do like real world games that would involve some spoilers or hints being left, and then a little scavenger hunt type
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
I think that's
Um,
where the term comes from. We didn't quite go into the real world, but we did go outside of the game into the social side of the internet with Discord and forums and whatnot.
right. And yeah, I think that kind of thing, it works, and it kind of, you self-select kind of like the diehards in the community or whatever, who will be kind of your best advocates anyway or whatever, to then stick around not only for their own enjoyment of the game, but the same kind of thing that like you as the designer, you're talking about enjoying watching other people play the game or whatever. It's one of those
Right.
games
And
that after you've been through it, you want to see other people succeed at getting through it, and so you want to be able to feed them little bits of help when they need it, so that they can keep going if they want to. And so yeah, you can be kind of just very invested in the community in that regard.
right, it creates a very interesting recursive effect. It's very much a game of knowledge. Like at this point, you've seen enough of the game. If you were just to delete everything and start over, it'd be a totally different game to your initial episode one that you did.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that effect carries forward because sure enough, it makes, I think, and I'm speculating, I think it makes our players more likely to want to pass that on to future generations of players. And it's really neat to see that effect in action. And yet we do. We have a whole slew of more or less experts on the game in our Discord that always greet the new players with, "Hey, tell us what you're stuck on. We'll talk about it."
Yeah, that's cool to do, and it's also yeah, just it's one of those games where um, from the very beginning, like I imagine, like you said, the player who gets stuck and puts the game down in the first 10 minutes. I feel like there's definitely just in like the universe of people who play games, like there are people who in the first 3 minutes would, or possibly like first 10 seconds or whatever, like would put this game down because they can tell it's not going to be their cup of tea. Um, but I feel like the people who get past that first 3 minutes or first 10 minutes or whatever it is, um, there's a lot of them who would enjoy a great deal of the game, maybe not going all the way to the end or whatever. Um, and so I know from my own point of view, having enjoyed the game as much as I did, like trying to find that subset of my friends that I know from various games online who are like, you would probably enjoy this game. You would probably enjoy this game, and trying to share it with them because both because I think it's something they would enjoy, and because yeah, it gives the opportunity for at some point in the future they're going to be stuck on something or whatever, and then want to go yeah ask for a hint or ask what's going on or whatever, and just being able to kind of like share that experience with them is fun.
Which is again, that's exactly what that whole side of things was about. There was a lot of intentional design to recreate that word of mouth effect from back in the day, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we did okay. I mean, so one thing I want to note is that I don't think there's such a thing as a game for everyone. I mean, even something as versatile as, say, Minecraft, there's still going to be some folks that it's not for them.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew it was this pretty small niche actually, and we knew that going into it is that this is not for everybody, but we want to do the best we can for the players that are actually the players that this game is for, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. 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 Well, I definitely count myself in that group of people. And yeah, it hit
You don't say.
it hit a home run with me, so that was great. Um,
I really am happy to hear it though, because as a developer, there is nothing that is a better feeling than seeing somebody really appreciate uh, a project that you've invested this much into, just emotionally, if nothing else.
Indeed. Yeah, so maybe that's a good segue into yeah, kind of like what's in store for the future of Heroes Spirit. We've talked a little bit already about kind of like the update that's going to kind of revamp the engine and the graphics, but do you want to say any more about that, or have we already said enough? Like I don't know. Yeah, at this point, it's always impossible with game development or whatever. Like you have timelines or different kinds of things, but I don't know what. This is your opportunity to kind of like share what people could look forward to.
Well, I mean, with the new Gen Plus update, which we're calling it, it's a mouthful. I know. It's mainly about increasing the technical specifications of the game. It's about compatibility. I know right now there's a whole uh, small group of players with certain hardware that are just not able to play this game at all. We're going to try to expand on that a bit. It's about upping the bar for just the aesthetic and the design, visually speaking, of the game. There's so many ways it could look and feel even better, and we're gonna explore that. And those are the major focuses is get it running better on more systems, make it look better, maybe sound a little better, but I'm not gonna promise too much on that. Um, that's our focus for now. There is there is a little surprise coming with this update, but I don't think I can go into that quite yet.
That's fine with me and probably fine with a bunch of other people because um, this game was good at kind of like teasing something around the corner for the entire game, and so teasing more that might be coming in future updates is just going to be more fun to have to look forward to. So that's good.
Yeah, that's I mean that's the main takeaway on the future. There's a lot more fun to be had. As you might have noticed in our community, we've announced that we also have a second game in the works at the same time.
I
Um,
actually did miss that somewhere along the way. So yes, do say more.
okay, it's once again we're the title is not designed to evoke much. It's called Adventuria, but this one's going. Uh, oh, how do I describe it? Basically, this is more of a sandbox RPG type of setup. And it's going to subscribe to a lot of the design philosophy behind Heroes Spirit. If that makes sense. I mean, it is the same developers, so a lot of the same standards, the same feelings on a lot of things. Exploration is going to definitely play a big role in it. Um, and one of the interesting points is that it's designed to be a multiplayer experience from the ground up. So that doesn't mean it's multiplayer only. That just means that uh, picture some other games like Minecraft or Terraria where they play in multiplayer just as well as they would single player.
I
That's
see.
kind of the line that we're going for on this.
I
So
see.
so that gives us a whole lot of new, oh, and there will be more than just the four directional endpoints but this time around. As fun as that is to design with, that
Right.
constraint, I do think we're also, at the same time, we're also ready to see what we could do with a better interface. So.
Yeah, it's imagine what you could do with a couple of buttons.
Right,
Wow.
right. So I look forward to exploring that a bit. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's still pretty early on that one, so I don't want to
Yeah,
build
I
too much hype, but I'm really excited. I think it's going to be great. And it is by the Binary Initiative, so you're going to have that same uh,
startup.
approach to it, I suppose.
Neat. That is cool. Um, yeah. All right. We've covered a lot of ground. This gave me a lot more kind of insight into a bit of the game. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any other things that you want to talk about, or any other things that you want to ask of the audience who might be listening to this at some point in the future?
Oh, yeah, we covered a lot of ground here. I'm gonna say I think we did pretty good. Uh, just for the people that think there's not enough save points in the game, just we're gonna fix that for you. That's one promise I'll make.
All right. Um, I've enjoyed yeah, I don't know, like all the save points. I one of the things I really like about doing content for YouTube when I'm playing games is the fact that I do always kind of like capture so much of the experience because my memory is often bad. And so it gives me a chance to go back and review. And so it's kind of like my videos are my own save points. You talked about this being a very much kind of a knowledge game or whatever. And even if I didn't pick up the knowledge the first time I played, I can go back and kind of like watch my video and pick up the knowledge the second time around again, or like take some more notes about some things that I need to come and revisit. Um, and so yeah, just talking about save points kind of like made me think about that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Especially once you cut down some of the exploration, you can rerun the same progress in 10 seconds that took you an hour the first time.
right. Yeah, I was really surprised when I guess in my new game plus when I kind of soft locked the progress because I never went to talk to the dragon to get the final portal stone or whatever before I'd
You
unlocked the
know,
other portals. Oh, go ahead.
it's interesting that you bring that up. That is, to my knowledge, the only soft lock, I think. That's it. Well, at least the only major one.
Uh huh.
And that was an accident. That was not intentional. However, for the aforementioned TAS speedrun compatibility issue, that's very difficult to fix. I cannot fix it without breaking all those speed runs in progress.
Right.
So that was another contributor to the heavy decision to retire the speed run mode, at which point we can make map changes, and I think we're gonna uh, tweak that a little bit to make that at least very difficult to do.
I see. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I also remember a point, and I think you and I had talked about this at some point before the interview or whatever. That um, there are places. There was one place in my playthrough where I went over to. I'm trying to think of the name of the. It's on the frozen shores right next to North Mundaman when you go across the water to like get up to that one little rocky point with like the uh, uh, unrequited rock or whatever it is. And then when you're coming back into North Mundaman, there's like three lava bats while you're
That's
trying to walk
actually
across the water.
That one's actually already been patched in this last little hot fix here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um, so now there's only two bats there to greet you.
I see.
Um, Cast runs should endure okay as long as they weren't relying on that death. And yeah, and you can now escape from there fairly easily.
I see.
It's still not still a challenge, but it's a much
Right.
more doable
But yeah, in
challenge.
terms of yeah, thinking about like other places that you could soft lock, that was kind of like the one that kind of like stepped into my mind or whatever is like when I was there and like dying a number of times, I was like, is it possible that I've soft locked myself here? And I can imagine that there's no good way for you to know for sure other than you have lots of testing and just kind of developer intuition in terms of like that it's always possible to kind of like, dodge around monsters or whatever whenever you get yourself save pointed or checkpointed at one of those difficult zones with difficult monsters. Also, I guess like the fact that New Game Plus Plus exists and all the enemies are immortal, like you already have a good sense of it's possible to get through all the zones dodging the monsters for the most part. Um,
It's you bring up an interesting point there. One little question that has haunted me. I do not know if it is possible to soft lock your keys or not. I'd assume so because there's a couple of areas like with a silver
Silver
key
key unlocks
somewhere
a silver key.
below the
Yeah.
door. Yeah. But aside from that, I don't know how difficult that is to do because that is a math problem that is very difficult to test. So
Indeed.
it's one that we've had to kind of just go based on player experience. So we've had to just watch all the players. Did any get stuck? Were there any major problem areas? And fortunately, our beta crowd were pretty good about calling things out. Nobody ever called out the keys, even during the beta. So I
Yeah.
guess
I
we
mean the
must
way
have
that
just
the way
got
that the
lucky there.
dungeon in the Hall of Doors is designed, like I think yeah, you had described it or someone else had described it as a big buffer basically or whatever that ensures that uh you're going to be carrying, assuming that you don't get soft locked early by somehow spending the keys in exactly the wrong place or whatever, which may or may
That's
not be
that's
possible.
that's the one I wonder. I don't know if that's
And
possible or
maybe you should
not.
put that as a
I'm
post
curious.
the guild hall and
I might have to do that.
Yeah, see if anyone in the community who's really invested in the game can come up with a way to lock themselves out of
It's
some
a
keys.
that is a fascinating prospect. I never thought of using the guild hall to test.
Yeah, because I can
Kind of go
imagine, yeah, like it's
go
an NP
GLaDOS on it
complete
here.
problem or whatever, and so there's no way just to like necessarily throw computing I mean, do you probably brute force it? Like, I can imagine you can reduce the map topologies into a small enough space that you could probably somehow, like brute force some kind of proof that you couldn't soft lock yourself. But that could also just be a fun problem that some people in the community might enjoy working on. So,
When the game first released, and I was super proud of our tool assist mode. I mean, okay, it doesn't have the save states, which I really wanted, but it's still a fantastic tool. It's capable of making frame perfect speed runs, and I wanted to show it off. So I got in there and made a little demo of how to kill a bat, and it's a frame perfect speed run up to the first bat kill, which is pretty cool. Um, the it never really took off like I'd kind of hoped it would, but it was still interesting because it made me aware of a new math problem I wasn't familiar with prior to this project, called the traveling salesman problem.
mm-hmm.
I wanted to see, mathematically speaking, what is the perfect route for 100% in this game. Uh, to collect every item, I'll put it that way.
Right,
And I have no idea because turns out that's a very difficult problem to solve. The only known way to get the correct answer that I have found is by brute force. And brute forcing with thousands of variables is,
yeah,
I haven't
just
done it yet, but
yeah,
I
just
am
impossible.
super curious to know.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Yeah, I haven't looked at other than kind of you know, low percent kind of stuff or whatever with speedruns. Like I haven't looked into any of that. And I have like no experience at all in terms of like actual speedrun task kind of stuff. Like I've played some randomizers where you play for speed, but I'm not kind of in that community crowd group of people who really go for that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of just vaguely aware of it. Um, yeah,
You
so
You mentioned the randomizers there. Uh, this one I don't know if it'll be in New Gen Plus or not, but it's one of my personal missions here is to get a randomizer built into this game as an added challenge mode with like a daily seed or weekly seed. I
yeah,
think
something
that'd
like
be
that would be
so neat.
great. Yeah,
And we've actually have started laying some of the framework for that to be possible. It turns out the biggest obstacle of that is logic control. So every item has to be tagged with, this one requires the hammer because there's a
right,
rock up the road. This one requires at least that silver key to be open back there. And it turns out you take those thousands of variables that we just talked about for the
right,
traveling salesman, and it gets a whole lot more complicated than that. At least I don't have to route them, but just the conditions
right. I
are crazy
imagine
to calculate.
just from I've been playing a lot of Legend of Zelda Randomizer recently,
Love
and
it.
so it is a game that, yeah, in terms of like the hero spirit upgrades that appear in the upper left, like there's about the same number of items as there are in Zelda. Things like the ladder and the recorder, which open up and kind of gate certain places inside dungeons around the overworld. Um, and so for that kind of finite set of like constraint solving, it's not so bad. With the Legend of Zelda and the Legend of Zelda randomizer, there are shops that sell keys and money is infinite from killing enemies, and so like the key problem is solved. And you were talking about how difficult, like you don't even know if there's a way to soft lock yourself with keys in the vanilla game, and so if you did a randomizer it would be even more difficult. And so if you run into that problem when you're trying to make a randomizer, I was just going to throw out there that if there's some way that the player can earn keys or some way that the player could do have some
What
alternative way to bust through a boulder or something, like if you can't solve the mathematical problem of proving that your randomizer can even work, like there's design ways to work around it that you could consider as well.
Yeah, and I might look into that. One of the things I liked about Hero Spirit, and it was a deliberate decision, was making the keys finite, for example,
Mm,
because it makes items so much more impactful when you know there's a finite number of them. The
Right.
infinite items become a grind in too many games, and I wasn't
Right.
looking for that.
Right.
But as a workaround, I, I'm gonna still attempt to just solve the logic
I see.
problems,
Okay.
see if I can't make it work. So I don't know when that'll happen, but someday we'll have a
Right.
randomizer.
And yeah, I appreciate not wanting to turn things into a grind, but at the same time, as someone who has also been sometimes not good enough to get through difficult button pressing games that need like high reaction times or whatever, like um, yeah, grinding is kind of like the bad player's way to get better kind of thing or whatever. And so yeah, like if you can't figure out the right order to spend your keys or you can't figure out the right way to solve this puzzle or whatever, like it's nice when there's kind of a release valve for the player that you don't have to grind, but you could choose to grind as another way around, kind of like
Maybe
backdooring
maybe
certain
at
puzzles or
a
something.
maybe at a cheat shop that you lose points on the end screen
Yeah.
for every cheat you take or something.
Right, something along those lines. I don't know. In any case, that's just, me
Yeah, it'll be fun to
spewing some
explore.
ideas and yeah, kind of like giving some of my own opinions on some of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I definitely, yeah, with most games that, at least most games, well, maybe the most is too strong. A lot of games that I played recently, like, um, either modding communities, which obviously you've done a bit of, or sometimes built into the games, like they add randomizers these days or whatever. And there's so many games where you can you don't even have to randomize like all that many things. Like yeah, when you just randomize some key items and upgrades or whatever, and manage to make it so it doesn't soft lock inside the randomizer, like even if there's not a whole lot, it tends to make a game that people enjoyed playing the first time become replayable in a way that people will get more enjoyment out of it. And so you often don't have to go too far in order to make things. Yeah.
And we did have a little fun with that actually with slot D, or as we called it, new game minus.
Right.
Um, yeah, but that's actually, so it takes half the items on the map at load
Mm-hmm.
and just totally scrambles their IDs so they could become just about anything. I added a few exceptions to keep the game from crashing, but you can find all kinds of stuff in there. And that was, yeah, so we kind of played with it a little, and that really started to create a desire for a proper randomizer because it's just so neat being able to find anything anywhere.
Right. And it also, um, it already kind of exists from the point of view of the original game and New Game Plus and New Game Plus Plus, because the things are located in different parts, and new games add like the underworld map or whatever. And so it gives the player a chance to leverage the expertise that they have already obtained in the first playthrough of the game in terms of knowing the map and understanding the basics of kind of movement and combat and stuff like that, and gives them a chance to showcase it in a different setting with different constraints. Um, and so a randomizer just kind of like, yeah, it brings that kind of same idea another step further for people who have, gotten that far or whatever, like a chance to just continue improving their skills in terms of like expertise. And I guess to some extent, like, yeah, like the TAS support, like if you're into that kind of stuff as well, like coming up with optimal speed runs and routing and all kinds of things like that are also a way for someone who's already kind of beaten the vanilla version of the game to then continue to take the expertise that they've obtained getting that far and push it even farther to do something
So,
competitive and exciting.
so it's funny. In addition to speed running, like even without speed being a factor in it, there was a whole bunch of work put into the design of a low percent route. I mean, it got just as much attention, the shortcuts, the backdoors, the secret mechanisms, skips, sequence breaking. That all got just as much design effort as the normal progression of the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way to, within just a couple minutes of starting the game, if you know exactly what to do, you can reach the credits. And
Yep.
in addition to that, you can also get to, well, it used to be any item. Anymore, it's most of the items. You can get to most items in the game within just a couple of minutes. if you know right what to do. And in addition to the knowledge where the item is and how to get it, there are secret routes to each item, such as I'm pretty sure you're familiar with one of the options to get the lava charm early.
Right.
There are probably 4 or 5 different ways into that room. So, yeah, little things like that just really, I don't know, it was fun to develop, and someday I have a personal uh, dream, if you will. I'd love to see. I've been watching GDQ for probably as long as they've been running. That's games done quick. They do speed runs for charity,
Right.
and I hope one day to see this game get there. And so I made sure to cater to the speed running community as much as possible. The shortcuts have shortcuts. I don't know how I could make it any more appealing.
Indeed. Um, all right. Well, there were no shortcuts in this interview today, but I enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you and finding out a whole lot more about you and the history of this game and some things that we might expect in the future. But yeah, this was fun, and I just want to say thank you again for making the game because I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. That's why we made it. I couldn't ask for a better player. Appreciate the run, and I'm hoping we'll coax you back into it in the new update.
So yeah, I will definitely keep my eyes and ears, perked up for whenever that happens.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.